So it was January, a Tuesday, 2024, and I am trying to check in for my airline flight online for the next morning. And guess what? I keep getting an error message. So I did what we all dread doing, which is picking up the phone and calling the airline. And after being on hold for quite a while and a long, circuitous conversation with the agent, I am told, I've never seen this error message before. And if you really want to be on that flight tomorrow morning, you'd better go to the John Wayne Airport right now, wait in line, and get a physical boarding pass from the agent at the gate. So I hop in my car and drive to the John Wayne Airport because it was imperative I get on that flight the next day, that my husband and I get on that flight the next day, which I'll tell you about in just a moment. But there I am driving to the airport, and I have to say I'm glad it wasn't recorded because I don't think I was saying very ministerial things. So I get to the airport and I wait in that long line, and I finally get to the agent, and she looks at me with that look you never want to see, which means I've already been 12 hours on this shift. I've heard everything anyone could ever tell me under the sun, and you are just one more person in a long line of people who need something. So she tries to check me in, and she looks at me and she says, you can't check in yet. It's got to be 24 hours before your flight. And I say, it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The flight's supposed to be at 8:30 tomorrow morning. I have to be on that flight. And she says, oh, and she starts clicking away on her keyboard. Never a good sign, right? Click, 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 click. Click, 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 click. Calls the agent over next to her. Click, 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 click. Finally, she looks at me and she says, I've never seen this before. Never seen this before, but I can't print out a boarding pass for you now, but if you come tomorrow morning, you might be able to get on the plane. So I took a breath and I said, look, I just got news that my father is going into hospice in Texas this week. And something inside me says, I have to be there. I have to be there. And I said, I know you hear a million stories every day. Everybody has to be somewhere at the airport. But I really do have to be there. And she looks at me, still no smile, still weary. And she clicks, clicks, clicks again on her keyboard. She clicks some more, and then she said, I'm not supposed to do this, but let me try. And then she looks at me and she said, can you and your spouse be at gate 15 in 85 minutes, ready to take off on a flight? That's the only thing I can guarantee you. And I said, yes. So I called Lawrence, who I said, hi, where are you? And he says, oh, I'm just driving home from work at Caltech in Pasadena. I said, can you be at the airport with our suitcases in 85 minutes? And he says, yes. And we were, and we got on that flight, barely, but we made it. What I remember about that moment is that this woman, this airport worker, somewhere midway through a long shift, somewhere after hearing 100 other stories, somehow, something inside of her was able to be ready to hear when a real need was presented to her. And not just to be ready to hear that, but to take action, even to bend the rules a little bit to make it happen. Like the woman in our Time for All Ages story this morning, this wasn't just something that happened in the moment for this woman. This was something that a lifetime of thinking and positioning herself had created, so that when something in front of her was a real need, she was able to know it was there and she was able to be responsive to it. It's a practice. And it turned out it was really important that we were there at that time, and I'll tell you more about that later. But the thing that this makes me think about is something, a book that came out, I think, back in 2008. It's by Monica Coleman, and it's called Making a Way Out of No Way. And it's a book on womanist theology, which well, first of all, let's define some terms, right? When we're talking about theology as Unitarian Universalists, what we mean is a system for how we make meaning of our existence. When we talk about a womanist theology, that's what we're talking about, the theology part. The womanist part means that this system is informed by specifically Black women. So this theology comes out of the experiences and the perspectives and the ideas of Black women. And she tells a story in that book about this group of domestic violence survivors who would meet in a church basement once a week. And one Sunday evening when they were meeting, this woman that she called Lisa came to the group, and Lisa had been very recently in a very, very violent situation, and she was missing large patches of her hair. And her self-esteem and spirit were at an all-time low point. And what happened in that group, this group that had very few resources, financial and otherwise, that most people would look at as a way of problem solving, they had figured out ways to respond to trauma, to the oppression that so many of the folks who came their way had experienced. And they took Lisa and they brushed and braided her hair, something very important to her culturally, and something that could help to begin to heal some of the wounds that she had experienced. This book is called Making a Way Out of No Way because it is about people who have found a way to have an option to do something when it seems like there is nothing that can be done. When resources are limited, when choice is limited, when the entire system around them is trying to stop them from having agency and taking action, they figured out ways to do something, to be present for people, to be responsive. And I think about this, I think about the airline worker, I think about the woman with the gloves, and I think this is all about figuring out what we can do when times are chaotic and difficult to respond to the moment. You know, I'm grateful to be part of Unitarian Universalism, which has a tradition of being responsive to the moment. This goes all the way back in our history. We know how to be ready. We've been ready throughout history. We were ready when Dorothea Dix saw that, Unitarian Dorothea Dix saw that people were being mistreated when they had mental illness or were intellectually disabled. And she created a whole system to help treat those people with more care. Universalist Clara Barton responded by creating the American Red Cross. You have Theodore Parker, the Unitarian minister who was so against slavery and working in that abolitionist movement. I mean, he was really ready. In fact, they said he used to keep a loaded pistol up on the pulpit while he preached, which, you know, different context, different time, right? We're not going to do that. But it shows that we have a history of being ready. Susan B. Anthony, you ready for the women's movement, the civil rights movement? We had James Reeb and Viola Liuzzo coming up, Unitarian minister and a Unitarian Universalist congregant, going to the civil rights marches and actually being murdered because of their participation in that. We've had people ready, people in this congregation ready for climate justice, LGBTQ rights. We have every resource in our history to suggest that we know in our DNA as a faith movement how to be ready for whatever may come. And for whatever may come is here, folks. I don't think I need to tell you that, really. I mean, you know it. You've probably been reading the news lately. when you can stomach it. You know, there's a lot we're concerned about in our world. We're concerned about what's happening with immigrants. We're concerned about trans people. Just this week I was reading, maybe you saw the Air Force not wanting to give retirement benefits to trans people who have served their full time. I mean, we're worried about so many folks right now, voting access and people of color and the way they're being treated in this current climate. It just goes on and on and on. The need for readiness is palpable. We have to be ready. We have to be ready, both within ourselves and as a community trying to respond out in the world. But I think it's important that we recognize that I said that with two parts. Ready within ourselves. Sometimes I think it's easy to focus on all the things we need to do, but we forget about what we need to be in order to do those things. Because it can feel so overwhelming. When there is so much to respond to, we can lose ourselves, the core self at our center, when we're trying to be responsive to all that's happening in the world. So as an example of that, I will tell you what happened when I got to Texas. After I finally got on that flight, we got to Texas. It turned out it was really important that we were there. My father was not on hospice at that point. There had been some snafu with the paperwork. And for those of you, and I'm sure there are many in this congregation, who have been in or are in a caregiving situation, you know that there needs to be sometimes loud voices to be advocates for people in those situations. And so we were able to go there and do that. And again, I probably said some things that weren't very ministerial to some people on the phone, but we got him on hospice because he had been going through a very long battle with leukemia, and my father knew his mind, and he knew he was ready to be on hospice. I've never seen anyone more eager for that hospice nurse to arrive. He was ready. And it was a tumultuous week, as those times are. We did our best to get on top of the medication situation and making him comfortable, and we were able to make him comfortable for the first time in a long time. And we fielded visits from friends and family, and we were there with him through all of that, trying to manage, and it was, as I said, it was like time out of time, chaotic in its way, like being caught in the middle of a tornado. But something happened the next Wednesday after I arrived that was different than all of that. Now, I have to tell you, and I'll just be really honest here because I think a lot of people can probably relate. My father was really a supportive person in my life. And a wonderful provider and so many wonderful descriptors about who he was. But I also had that sense that I think a lot of us do with our parents, that our parent never really saw us as we are, never really knew who we were exactly, never fully witnessed who we are. And so I felt like I was pretty whole with that knowledge, you know, and I went there that week and I thought I can help out as best I can, and that's, you know, okay. And so I did, and that Wednesday, I'm there with my father, and he needed to be turned on his side, and he was still cognizant. You could carry on a conversation with him, but he couldn't move around very well. And my mother kind of helped from one side, and I took his hand and his arm, and we got him over on his side and made him comfortable. And he didn't let go of my hand, which, you know, we didn't have the kind of relationship where we had a lingering touch like that. And he held onto my hand, and I was actually a little bit uncomfortable. But I looked into his eyes then, and he was seeing me. Whatever had been in the way for all of us, that stuff in our lives that gets in the way from seeing each other was gone. What I saw and what I hope I radiated back was just the pure essence of who he was. Just love. Just love radiating out of his eyes just a few hours before he died. You know, as we start this new beginning together, this congregation and me, I think we need to remember that the work is hard out in the world, but that even in the midst of turmoil and chaos and loss and grief and struggle, there are these moments of just unexpected beauty and grace that can surprise us if we have lived a life so that we are ready to receive them when they happen. And I think I could receive that moment because of people like the woman at the airline counter and being connected to communities like this over the years where people remind me over and over that there are joys available and that we have to ready ourselves so that we can experience them when they happen, even when they happen in the middle of everything else seeming like it's topsy-turvy. I've begun this week as your what they call contract minister. And what that means is that it's a renewable contract. And one of the reasons we went this route is to give a little more space for this congregation to be ready for what the future holds. But I also want folks here to know I will continue to do the work of interim ministry during this time as well. And that work means looking at the systems that we have, asking questions, being brave on my part and saying, I'm not sure that works really well. When you're a settled minister, you can't say stuff like that for years, right? Because then they just want you to go. So it might be that in a year or two, it's time for me to go because I have to raise enough of those questions and it's like, you've done good work here, but we need somebody else to bond with. Or maybe not, we don't know. We've allowed ourselves a little breathing room in these extraordinary historical times that we live in so that we can figure out what the work going forward together means. And I am grateful for that opportunity to be with you during such a challenging time in our world. So, here we are. And the question is, are we ready? And remember that to be ready, we need to be rooted in compassion. To be ready, we need to be informed by justice. To be ready means we need to be strengthened by community. And if you're here for the first time today, listen. You will be able to be ready so much better with other people in community than you can at home alone on your couch. Trust me, that doesn't work. And we are ready to practice presence in our world, to meet whatever may come. And we do all of this by also nourishing and nurturing and paying attention to our core self, our essence, the thing that looks back out of our eyes when we've been able to drop all the stuff the world puts in our eyes sometimes. That essence of who we are right there at our center. That essence which is love. Folks, let's get ready together.